Greetings from Athens, Greece. A bit late here, but very excited to be with you all, even virtually. My name is Dimitris Mendis. I'm a senior energy geographer at the World Resources Institute and the project lead of the Energy Access Explorer, background in mechanical and sustainable engineering, energy engineering, and did my PhD in geospatial electrification modeling, and I've been working in the intersection of geography and energy systems for about 10 years. As all of you know, and I don't think I need to emphasize this particular point to you all in this audience, energy is a key enabler for socioeconomic development. There are several studies that point out that the level and the quality of health services, education, gender equality, indoor environment, several daily activities can all be upgraded with access to modern energy services. Now, in order to achieve universal access to modern energy, proper energy planning needs to be carried out in order to match the supply with the growing demand in the most cost-effective way, while taking into account several other important criteria, such as data on environment, access to finance, etc. The use of geospatial data or geographic information systems and associated analytical tools to conduct strategic energy planning has multiplied in the recent years. There are several examples where geographic information systems have been used as a planning tool for renewable energy infrastructure. Here you see the example of IRENA's Global Renewable Energy Atlas. So there are a number of applications that focus on mapping the renewable energy resources at different levels and resolutions, spanning from local and national to regional and global. However, most of these online applications focus on renewable energy supply without considering the location-dependent energy demand and the associated costs of delivering energy services. Then we have online GIS applications that are used to identify potential markets for off-grid electrification. These usually have one or more of the following limitations. So they usually consider limited data on what we call social and productive uses of electricity. They deploy a limited number of GIS functions, use often proprietary or password-protected software, do not engage closely with local stakeholders, and as such remain often outdated. Finally, we have a number of applications that provide useful least cost electrification technology and investment outlooks. Here you see the example of the global electrification platform that has been led by the World Bank, and the World Resources Institute has contributed to the development of the global electrification platform based on an open source spatial electrification tool. These applications that adopt a least cost electrification modeling algorithm usually consider limited data on aspects of demand and affordability, and due to heavy computational requirements, such online applications incorporate usually pre-run scenarios. Also, several of these online applications do not necessarily ensure local ownership, which is a critical issue for the longevity of these initiatives. And that meant that my background has been in developing least cost electrification modeling algorithms and analysis. Back at KTH, Zero List of Technology in Stockholm, Sweden, I initiated the development of the open source spatial electrification tool, which is adopting a least cost electrification modeling algorithm. Now, the limitations of the existing applications and a multi-year stakeholder engagement exercise have helped us better understand the requirements for the mapping platform that we started conceptualizing and developing a couple of years ago. So, which are some of the high-level requirements / reasons that led us to the conceptualization of the Energy Access Explorer? First of all, there is an important need to treat demand and supply as equal. If we remember the main objective of energy planning, this is to meet supply with the growing demand in the most cost-effective manner while taking into account a number of other criteria. If we don't understand demand from the bottom up, the supply strategies that we are designing won't be viable neither for the consumers nor for the utilities. And consumers can be either households or institutions. So we do need a platform that synthesizes granular data on both demand and supply while taking into account other criteria and constraints which are geospatial in nature, such as access to finance, environment, protected areas, etc. Furthermore, it is essential to reduce reliance on geographic information systems capacity, GIS capacity, and programming expertise. We have planning agencies, we have clean energy enterprises, we have development finance institutions, healthcare departments with limited or no GIS expertise or programming expertise, who should still be able to develop custom high-resolution geospatial maps on the fly. Finally, data providers need access to an open source, which means no licensing costs. Open source doesn't necessarily translate to open access. GIS data repository to reduce data transaction costs, especially in geographies where there is no established means of dissemination of open geospatial data, and synthesizing data from various databases that come in different resolutions and formats becomes usually a resource-intensive exercise. So we designed the Energy Access Explorer to be a modular tool that takes into account the multidimensionality of energy access, trying to bring together demand and supply, as well as other important criteria. And our vision is to provide geospatial data and geospatial technology and inform pathways to create a future where all people and institutions have access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy services, while at the same time ensuring socioeconomic development. What is the Energy Access Explorer, or EAE? It is an online, open source, and interactive platform that enables different audiences, such as clean energy enterprises, energy planning institutions, donors, and development-oriented institutions, to identify areas where access to energy should be expanded and prioritized, and at the same time ensure the linkage to socioeconomic development. More specifically, the use of the Energy Access Explorer enables, as you can see here, strategic energy planning, where electrification planning agencies are able to link electrification and development. It also enables market intelligence. The expansion of energy access markets is something that clean energy enterprises, mini-grid developers, solar home system providers are interested in. And they can use this platform to get a better understanding of aspects of affordability and the level of service needed, especially if they do not have this particular capacity built in-house. I'm referring to GIS capacity in this case. Then we have donors and development finance institutions that can use Energy Access Explorer to identify areas where grants and investments may have the most impact. Finally, service delivery institutions in the health, education, and agriculture sectors are able to estimate or to develop high-level estimates of energy requirements associated to development services. Please note that we started developing this platform about 2.5 years ago. The tool has already been developed, or a beta version of the tool has already been developed for Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda in close collaboration with key government agencies and local stakeholders. We do also work with our office in India and a number of partners to customize the development of the Energy Access Explorer in 2 states in India. And we're currently working with the African Clean Energy Technical Assistance Facility Program and local governments to assess the need for customizing Energy Access Explorer in up to 6 additional countries in the Sub-Saharan African region. This includes Nigeria, Ethiopia, Zambia, Sierra Leone, and Malawi. Here comes a quick example, which is the case of Uganda. So here, I'd like to show you how we worked, how we collaborated with Uganda's Energy Sector GIS Working Group, which is basically a group of engineers and GIS associates from all key energy planning institutions in the country. So you have participants from the Ministry of Energy, from transmission distribution company, the regulator, etc. We are also collaborating in Uganda with the Ministry of Health on mapping the healthcare facilities and carrying out a GIS-based assessment to estimate ranges of electricity requirements for the healthcare facilities or the unserved healthcare facilities and the associated supply options. So the Energy Access Explorer synthesizes several geospatial data on demographics, such as population density. These are just some examples of datasets that are already incorporated in the platform. Data on socially productive use of electricity, such as education facilities, healthcare facilities. Users can click on the various data points and read information, not only about the type of healthcare facility, the name of that particular facility, but also information about the electrification status and the type of electrification technology that is deployed. In this case, we are looking at an off-grid system where there is a PV setup. This information has been provided by the Ministry of Health. Users can also zoom in and use the satellite imager, that is the satellite base map that is available in the Energy Access Explorer, to basically validate the various data sets that are integrated in the Energy Access Explorer. So here we can see that this particular healthcare facility of type 2 is actually a few meters away of the actual facility on the ground. There are also data on agricultural zones. So we're still under socioeconomic activities. Data on demographics and socioeconomic activities can be used to help users get a better understanding of current or potential demand for energy. Then we have data, we're adding data on resource availability, the global horizontal irradiation. Just an example, there are several other data sets on resource availability. Data on power infrastructure, the transmission distribution network, which has been provided by Uganda's Energy Sector GIS Working Group, as well as the power generation network. Please note that data on power generation can also be found in WRI's Global Power Plant database, which can also be visualized through Resource Watch. Then additional data, which are not necessarily directly linked to demand or supply, but still important for the various target audiences to prioritize areas of interest. So in this case, data on protected areas, data on access to finance, in this case, finance service providers. For every square kilometer in the select geographies, the tool can provide 4 analytical outputs. This can be further modified. We can add more analytical outputs. We can remove some of the existing ones depending on the needs in various geographies. These analytical outputs indicate high priority areas through the Energy Access Potential Index, basically areas where access to energy should be expanded, areas with higher potential demand, areas with higher potential supply, and areas where assistance to external finance is needed the most. Here, we can see the result of a custom multi-criteria analysis that indicates high priority areas. So with brighter color, we see high priority areas as opposed to darker color, which are close to healthcare facilities, in this case, far from distribution lines, and with high solar radiation. Of course, results can be summarized in graphs, they can be summarized in tables, it can be extracted in the form of a report, or in a GIS format, in a tabular format for further analysis. This is just an example building on 9-10 different, let's say, data sets. The combination of more than 25 granular geospatial data that are integrated in the platform allows actually for a limitless number of scenarios that can be developed on the fly, so users do not need to download any GIS software based, and so that they can generate custom analysis on the fly based on their criteria, based on their perspectives, because these different target audiences come with different perspectives. Note again that this is a multi-criteria decision analysis algorithm and not a cost optimization one. So the Energy Access Explorer aims to complement existing cost optimization algorithms and not substitute. Beyond its visualization and analytical capabilities, the Energy Access Explorer functions also as a data repository following certain data standards. And this is something that helps reduce the so-called data transaction costs, both for the data providers and for the data users. So its backend infrastructure, so what we saw earlier was the front end, now we're seeing the backend, comes with an easy-to-navigate, user-friendly content management system, which has been developed specifically and customized for the needs of this particular platform. The CMS, the content management system, allows administrators with limited or no GIS and programming expertise to add data and metadata in a simple manner, Administrators can also customize visualizations. They can decide how data are grouped. So you can group data under demographics, under socially productive uses, under demand, or under health, etc., and how they can be presented in the front end. They also have the possibility to add new multi-criteria analysis. They can decide how data contribute to certain analysis, etc. So here you can get a glimpse of the back end. In the geographies panel, you can see the various geographies for which EAE is being developed for. You can then see the various datasets for a given geography, say Uganda, and you can also configure visualizations for each dataset. Here we are looking at the global horizontal irradiation for Uganda. All right. Of course, this platform wouldn't be in its current state if we didn't have important partners supporting the development of the EAE in different levels, from local, international to global. There are data partners that provide data to be incorporated in the Energy Access Explorer, government agencies who support the adoption and usage of EAE in their geographies, advisory partners who provide guidance on what the energy access and development sectors may need from such a geospatial platform, and at the same time facilitate introductions to other stakeholders at both local, national, and international level, and finally partners that have funded this initiative either directly or through WRI's larger Energy for Development initiative. Coming to an end, in working to achieve change at scale and achieve our long-term vision, we apply WRI's threefold approach, which is count it, change it, and scale it. First, we start with a bottom-up approach to understand the needs of local stakeholders at national and subnational level, while understanding the current ecosystem in each geography. This stakeholder engagement has guided us throughout the development of EAE until now, and will continue doing so. In order to address some of the limitations of the existing applications I mentioned earlier, while taking into account the stakeholder needs, we developed a modular approach, or a modular platform that can be expanded to include new geographies and new features with minimal resource requirements. So we understood what the issue has been when it comes to online geospatial energy access platforms, and we worked and continue working on changing it. Thanks to this modular and multidimensional approach that we've been following for the development of EAE, we raised essential interest, sometimes translated into funding as well, from key stakeholders at subnational and national level, the government of Uganda, whether it's the Energy Sector JS Working Group, the Ministry of Health, the government of Kenya, at national and subnational level, where we do quite some work on supporting the development of subnational energy plants, and global level, our engagement with sustainable energy for all on the integrated energy planning work, empowering healthcare, our prospective collaboration with the World Health Organization, our work with the Africa Clean Energy Technical Assistance Facility program, and our collaboration in these 6 additional sub-Saharan African countries, our prospective collaboration with the Clean Cooking Alliance, etc. So in the coming years, we will emphasize on scaling the use of EAE to support analysis for the achievement of SDG 7, and at the same time related development outcomes, where it is needed the most. So scaling doesn't mean developing the platform for several countries for the sake of, let's say, adding new geographies in the online platform, but we want to make sure that this platform is being developed where it is actually needed the most, while ensuring its sustainability. For the initial set of geographies, we prototype the platform for Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. So we'll be working on building the capacity of key local agencies in each geography, so this particular initiative will be sustained over the longer term. Finally, I'd like to close with a 1.5 minute short video. I hope I do have this time. It's a short video with testimonials and quotes from a number of stakeholders that suggest how the Energy Access Explorer can add value in our efforts to expand access to energy services and make the link to other sustainable development outcomes.
in order for you to plan properly, you need to have information that tells you where the resources are, where the people you need to serve are, and most importantly, where it is possible to actually develop the necessary infrastructure to serve these people.
The fact that you're overlaying population density on vulnerable communities versus on access and all of those things is very valuable, especially to our mission.
Yeah, it will lessen the burden of wasting a lot of time to identify the facilities.
Someone at the extreme end of the world is able to sit and at a click they can access the data, they can make analysis of information that is, that has been supplied by someone who is very far away again.
Through this platform, our planning will move from the traditional way of planning to a more sophisticated way.
If you want to use intelligent, market-based, and technology-appropriate planning, then the Energy Access Explorer is what you should use.
All right, so let me stop here. If you're interested in learning more, contributing to the development of the Energy Access Explorer, please do reach out. This is a collaborative initiative. We work together with a number of partners on co-creating this particular initiative, and we do welcome everyone in this initiative.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you for that. We've got some questions coming into the Q&A. And I did actually want to start with something that was really, I think, but obviously in the interest of time, I think you had to go quickly there. You talked about data standards. And I'm curious, did you develop any new standards or kind of adopt any existing ones? And kind of what was that process like? Because I think that's probably something that's going to be really relevant to a lot of the folks that are listening here.
Yeah, we initiated this work on developing data standards for geospatial electrification mapping and planning in collaboration with KTH, the Rollins of Technology in Stockholm, Sweden, World Bank, and TESMAP that led the development and continues leading the development of the Global Electrification Platform, and a number of other institutions, and reached out to a number of tool developers to understand what kind of inputs data they use in their geospatial electrification modeling or geospatial electrification analysis, whether it's supply-based analysis or demand assessments. And we contributed our findings to SE4All's data standards workshop, which took place earlier this year. It was during summer. I believe there is an interesting report out there. So there have been some important steps towards developing data standards. I don't think we are there yet, but there has been an important, let's say, first couple of steps made towards this direction. I prefer calling it data guidelines, which can eventually, or if these guidelines are eventually adopted by the larger modeling community and the data providers, we can then call these standards.
That's helpful. Yeah, I think that's such an important topic that I think a lot of us just kind of struggle with. One of the questions in the Q&A is asking about what are the biggest gaps in data or tools for expanding this to other countries.
Yeah, I'd like to, yeah, this is a very important question, and it really depends on the geography. But I think the most important thing that all of us need to understand is what are the most important parameters in this analysis. Like, what happens if we do not have enough information in certain, let's say, areas, and how does this lack of information influence the results? And some of the most important data sets are the transmission distribution network, which is usually not available in public domains. And this is a data set that can influence the analytical outputs, whether it's outputs of least cost electrification modeling work or analytical outputs of a multi-criteria analysis can influence the results of this geospatial analysis significantly. So this is one very important thing. Another important set of data sets is on the so-called social and productive uses of electricity. You may find publicly available data on the location of healthcare facilities in databases, in crowdsourcing databases such as OpenStreetMap, for example, or healthsite.io. And if you are to compare this with the databases that a Ministry of Health may have, you will see oftentimes a significant difference. I'm not saying that this is happening in all geographies because we haven't looked through, we haven't had engagements with all, let's say, ministries in its geography, but in the various geographies where we have had ongoing, where we have had engagements, we have realized that data that are available in public domains or crowdsourcing databases are usually poorer as compared to the data that a government agency may hold. So we are trying to unlock this information while working closely, collaborating closely with key agencies in each country. In Uganda, I mentioned our collaboration with the Ministry of Health. We have recently initiated similar collaboration with the Ministry of Health in Zambia. So data on social and productive uses, data on the demand data. So one thing is understanding where the healthcare facilities are located, education facilities are located, agricultural activities are happening, and another is the latent demand or the unserved demand for these particular institutions and activities. And there are important initiatives out there. I believe we have some participants from UMass that try to focus more on estimating or predicting demand in developing economies. Such information can then be integrated in the Energy Access Explorer or can be used to better inform least cost electrification modeling work. So some work or some more focused work on GIS-based demand assessments will be very important as we move forward.
That's helpful. Yeah, I think that's really I think helpful to hear. And maybe in just a minute or so, I think we're maybe running a little short on time. You mentioned you had done some kind of more in-depth work with like a later version of the platform with a subgroup of countries. So maybe that's kind of a good segue into to this question. Are there any kind of top stakeholder needs that you're really working to address at the moment? And do they vary by country? If you could expand on that, that might be helpful.
One thing that keeps coming up in our conversations with local stakeholders is the conversation about ownership. They want to make sure that this platform will eventually be their product as much as it is, let's say, everyone else who has contributed to the development of it. And that's why it's very important to have a system in place, or the content management system that I briefly described earlier on, that will allow them to easily maintain and administer that particular platform with minimal resource requirements. So you are not necessarily asking the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Energy to hire energy modeling experts or programming experts in order to maintain this platform. We want to make sure that with minimal resource requirements and following certain capacity building, let's say, activities, the platform will be sustained in the future. So the ownership question is something that keeps on coming back, and that's why we decided to develop EAA for a limited number of geographies where it is actually needed and where we can have stakeholder engagements, as opposed to developing a global platform. The tool is country agnostic or geography agnostic, which means that it can be customized for several geographies, but we want to make sure that it is customized in collaboration with the local stakeholders. So this is something that I would say as a top stakeholder need make sure that there is also a password protected version of the application. There can be the public front end, and there can also be a password protected version of the application. There can be an offline version of the application. So we are developing both of these modes of operation as well. But this is what I would say. This is what I think is the most, let's say, important point that keeps on coming up in our conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to end on. Important that you're really thinking kind of long term, that you're not having a splashy kind of debut of your platform, but you're really thinking about how's this going to be sustainable for years to come. Thank you so much.